Yeah.
So now we've got an interesting one. The last point is, I'll let Andy go down that path and ask that question.
So one of the many surgeries I've had over the years, I had part of my vagus nerve removed.
Vagotomy.
Because I had a tumour wrapped around my esophagus.
Interesting.
And the only choice was...
Yeah, no choice.
I had to cut through it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So it's only part of it. Sorry, on the left side. Somewhere there-ish. I'm not exactly sure where, but I'm wondering what effect, because they told me that that would potentially affect my gut in terms of food.
Yep.
And it did to one point where I actually couldn't eat food without being sick. So I had to
relearn how to
change everything. Yeah. Relearn to eat, basically. But then, I'm wondering what effects there are even beyond that.
Yeah.
mBraining perspective as well.
Absolutely, because if it affects the gut, the digestion aspect, then it affects. Hark back to that first question.
Yeah. So you've kind of.
It affects everything, right? Now, it used to be standard practice 20 years ago. If somebody had peptic ulcers, bad ulcers, they would just give them a vagotomy. They just cut the signal there because they said there was stress that was causing the problem, and so if we cut the signal down to the gut brain, then, and you know, interestingly enough, it would solve some of the problems for some of the people, not all the people. And it was only more recently that wonderful man in Adelaide, the doctor, great Aussie, who put himself through the danger of actually infecting himself to prove that it was Helicobacter pylori was the prime creator of ulcers, serious ulcers. So, got the Nobel Prize, I believe, recently, for it. So, gutsy effort, so to speak. And since then, they've stopped doing vagotomies. I've spoken to a few people who have had vagotomies, and they said it definitely did impact them. And it did impact them not just in terms of the food digestion, but they felt differently in themselves. But you go through a whole heap of stuff. It's not just done in isolation of, you had a tumour that was being removed, right, etc. So you've got a bunch of stuff going on that makes you start to question yourself and life and the fact you're alive and, fantastic. And so it's hard to separate, what's going on to just the vagotomy. But the cool thing is that if they didn't cut it completely, if they didn't do the whole of the vagus, and the other cool thing is the vagus is Latin for wandering. So the vagus in the 10th cranial nerve comes out and then wanders all through the I wouldn't say freaking torso, it goes everywhere, right? So there's multiple arms of it. Porges, Professor Porges has a theory called Polyvagal Theory, because it turns out that we've actually got not just one vagus, but from an evolution perspective, we've got two. I really don't know why he calls it polyvagal, which could be bivagal, but anyway, it doesn't sound as good as poly. It's multi-branching, and there's a more ancient arm to it, which innervates largely the heart region, but the diaphragm, and then the more modern myelinated arm, which goes throughout the rest. So if they've only cut one part, you've still got other channels. And with neuroplasticity, you can pretty much relearn to do almost anything. I mean, there's experiments where they put things on people's tongues who are blind, and they've learned to be able to see stuff in the visual cortex, and they can prove this by putting in the fMRI and see the visual cortex light up. That the patterns on their tongue, like they actually make a grid array, like a CCD array, like a camera. So, and it has little tingles. So, but because the tongue's got such refined, high density detectors, you can learn to see with your tongue.
Do you have to stick the tongue out? So other people would see the tongue.
Oh, yes, that's right. What is he doing? So if you can use your tongue for seeing, you can rewire anything to anything and connect anything to anything, and that's how weird, speaking of sex brain, a lot of weird fetishes get going because people connect up, and once it's happened multiple times. But there are certain times in our personal ontological development where we're primed for certain changes. So the age, the first 18 months is one, and we're learning language and a whole bunch of things. Then from the age 3 to 4 is another one. Then there's the age 6 to 7 is typically another one. Then there's another one that is around puberty, which is slightly different for males and females. And there's another one that happens in mid-20s. There's a lot of neural circuitry, both programmed cell level. We prune off a lot of neurons that aren't being used. So if we are in a culture where we learn a particular language, the neurons for tones that are not in the tonal range of your language get pruned off. But if you were bilingual, then those neurons stay. So if you were Asian and you learn an Asian language, which is a tonal language, versus English, a Romance language, then completely different tonal spreads. And if you grew up bilingual, you have a huge range. So if we actually put you in a lab, put headphones on, and start putting different frequencies, you'd be able to hear things that, because I'm monolingual, I wouldn't. And it's well documented, and in fact, one of the ways of accelerating language learning for these languages is to teach people to be able to make distinctions on the tones. Because if with 3 months of practice of hearing the tones that you can't normally hear, because those neurons have been paired off when you were 3 years of age, you can regrow them. So you can regrow pretty much anything. It'll be more around the sense of getting in touch with some aspects that you may not have been easily getting in touch with, because those normal channels that you've been using before the vagotomy, when it suddenly gets switched off by them ablating it or cutting it, then those bits will downregulate. So it'll be about making more refined distinctions and discriminations at a gut level around the prime functions and the core competencies. Start noticing that sort of stuff. If you just start, and the best way to do it will be through balanced breathing, and then getting in touch with those aspects. Of course, it all comes down to, I think, the whole ology thing. We done the ologies?
Yeah, we've done the ologies.
Done the ologies?
Grant, can I just ask, you've used the word down-regulating several times. Just a moment to help us understand what you're really
it's a term that comes really from control theory, and I'm an engineer and scientist from way back. So systems get up or down regulated. So it's kind of like their level of response to the environment. It's a bit, I think about it, say, as if you go to your stereo system and you ramp up the volume level, you've up-regulated the system. So you put in a signal and it gets amplified really strongly. Or you can down-regulate it and wind that down to, and the same signal's coming in from the radio or the DVD player or whatever, but the amount that's coming out of speakers is really quite low. It's quite quiet and muted. So, and of course then you can shift bass and treble, so you can up and down regulate across different frequencies and different channels. And if you think about it in the human system, it happens in the same way. And in terms of the signals coming up and down through the 3 brains, we have have you guys heard of the Reticular Activating System, the RAS? Yeah, a lot of people nodding their heads. In the central part of the reptilian, the ancient part of our central nervous system, we have a formation called the reticular formation, which has a thing called the Reticular Activating System. And every one of your senses, it's a filter. Every one of your senses, except your sense of smell, flows through the RAS. And it filters information through to the other parts of the brain, the prefrontal, cortex, etc., frontal lobes. So you don't get conscious awareness of stuff. So for example, right now we've been talking and you've been focusing on what's happening up in the room. You probably haven't been noticing the sound of the air conditioner. So let's say the sound of the air conditioner. And now I bring your awareness or attention to it. And that attentional focus is done through the reticular activating system. But if that horrible smell occurred in this room, it wouldn't matter.
It wasn't me.
It wouldn't matter whether or not you'd been focusing on me and you're lost in the story of what we were talking about. The sense of smell would override it because the RAS doesn't filter smell. But everything else you'd pretty much be able to ignore if you're really focused. It's responsible for what's called the cocktail party phenomena, which they talk about in psychology. Where if we go to for dinner tonight at the pub and we're chatting away about something we're both really passionate about, you'll be able to hear my voice, even though there'll be all this cacophony of other voices, same frequencies and tones going on around the room, and you can tune out all of that and hear my voice until somebody 3 tables over says your name. Or says something that, you just bought a Ferrari yesterday, and somebody mentions Ferrari, and suddenly it'll jump out of that blooming noise confusion which you are switching off and not attending to. Suddenly you'll hear something that's really important. But you start getting interested in something, next thing they're everywhere. This is what the RAS does.
In the last few minutes, you briefly touched on the ologies.
Excellent. So we're going to come back to that. And that was No, I just want to finish the RAS bit though.
Oh, did you?
No, I just need to, which is that the Reticular Activating System is setting your filters for what you're noticing and not noticing, and so in terms of up and down regulation, the information that's going through your system from your heart and gut is actually being filtered through the reticular formation.
So it's not a positive or negative.
Oh, it's not a positive or negative.
Down or up is does
But
not.
what directionalizes your RAS and therefore your up and down regulation is the heart. The heart neural network connects up through the vagus into the reticular formation. So it's about salience. This is one of the other reasons why the heart reads. Because if you get stuff right in your heart, you hold it deeply in your heart, these heart neural networks, they're setting the filters in the reticular activating system for you to notice, and that's what. And that's the secret of the secret.
Exactly.
Right? That's why if you set intention, you set in your heart, it sets your RAS, and then stuff just starts to happen. Things just pop out for you. Everything starts to go more smoothly. And this is about learning to up or down regulate your neural networks through.
Just from
And you know Greg Brain's work too, don't you?
Yes, that's
And
right.
one of the things that most impressive stories connected to that is that he was one of the few people who was able to meet secretly and privately a Tibetan Buddhist abbot, I guess you'd call him an abbot. And one of the things he wanted to know, because he was exploring what's missing in terms of the sort of popularized secret sort of formula, and because he suspected, as others are teaching, that it's the heart that's missing. We can do all kinds of stuff from duality, but from the oneness consciousness, that's what we need to head for. And he asked the abbot, he says, what I really want to know through an interpreter, what's going on when you're praying, when you're chanting? And he was blown away by the abbot's answer. He said, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling. It's feelings. In his own way, he was saying, I'm feeling what I'm praying for.
Yeah.
So
Not a head trip.
no. And so Greg and others have been following, these threads in the maze to lead back to the emperor.
Yes, exactly. So this is the governor.
The
It governs. And the dance between here and here sets things like the reticular activating system, which allows information to come. So, as I was saying, it all comes back to the ologies, I think, and that is, what's your teleology? What is it you think you're here on the planet for? What's your purpose? What do you believe you've got this gift of this life to do? Based on that, what's your sense of beingness? What are you being and doing? Because I like to link doing with being, because otherwise it's dangerous. You can end up with a head identity and not a head, heart, gut identity. And the neural network leverage, that neuroplasticity is in the doing, not in the, thinking I am. Right? So you've got to have an identity that has a doingness to it. So if you go, so what do you believe you're here for? And how are you doing yourself on a day-to-day basis? And then what's getting in the way? And now you've got a sense of direction, because now you know what to start. Set your awareness for, through RAS, what to do pattern interrupts for, and then what to install new patterns. Because you can say, go and sit in a cave for the next 3 years and do lots of meditation on what's going on at the gut level. Great. I guarantee you'll grow new neural networks there, but for what purpose? It's like every one of us is differently enabled. I don't like the term disabled, because we're all differently enabled. And there's no one perfect, platonic person. Every person should have exactly this set of, well, that would be a clone, right? And show me the perfect clone anyway. How would you know whether you should have blonde hair, no hair, like me, pointy head, 20/20 vision, maybe you should have 40/20 vision, I don't know. So it kind of comes back to, what is it you want out of life, and are you getting what you want out of life? And if you're not, then that's where you directionalise your coaching, not your self-coaching, to bring yourself into the highest expressing of you. And you're going to be getting into highest expressions today and tomorrow, predominantly tomorrow, but you'll be denormalising that, I hope, before the end, with which is to take away the noun form, expression, and your highest expressing, because you are not a human being, you're a human becoming. With neuroplasticity, it means you can change, and you are changing. So ontology, the nature of beingness, is really about the nature of becomingness. So you will definitely have had shifts in your vagus nerve. But guess what? We're all doing microvagotomies because there's aspects of our personal culture, our personal history, going back to multiple generations, where each of us have been left with different vagal. So treat the vagus and the sympathetic nerve system as an intelligencing system, because it is. That's one of the things I've been looking at the last 12 months. You could literally treat it as a brain. It's an incredibly complex informational processing system. And it links directly to things like willpower. You know, our will to power, to be able to act in the world. To take those feelings from the heart, the gut brain and the sex brain, and bring them out, connected from the heart brain and the head, out into the world.
And when they're not connected,
Then,
that's where we have the problem.
that's right. That's right.
Then the highest expressions of expressing,
Exactly. So
and we get to pick up the pieces.
the beautiful thing is, it is changeable.
Yeah.
You know, that you literally can. I'll just finish on this story and then it's time. My beloved is a nurse, and so she does a lot of community nursing in our little local community. We live 4 hours from here down in Gippsland Lakes and tucked in Little Elizabeth, and a very small population. And there's this guy who used to be a world-class pianist, performed all over the planet, and he had a stroke at a reasonably young age, late 50s, early 60s. And he was told he'd not only never play the piano again, but he'd never walk again. Now, he's now 92 or 95 or something. I mean, he's just amazing. He still drives. He plays the piano every single day. This is a guy who was told he would never walk again, let alone use his hands with refined, dexterity. And he was just determined that he was going to play again. And he plays every Sunday in the local church. Right? And this is a guy who drives, he does everything, and he was in a wheelchair and told, you know, at the age of 60, you will never walk again. So every one of us can take whatever we've got going, because no one has a perfect life, and if they do, good luck to them. I'm glad, you know, although the Buddhists would say they'll end up with the suffering of suffering because they've never really experienced suffering. Every one of us, the nature of an entropic universe, a disordered universe, is that things are always, you know, there are more ways for things to be messy than not messy. So that means the probability is things are going to screw up in our lives. We're all going to have times when we're not getting what we want out of life.
If we could ever change anything in the medical world and profession, it would be to teach and perhaps even say that by law you can never say never.
That's right.
To a patient.
That's right.
Ever.
Because there's been so many miracles, things that we're starting to explain and starting to learn how to be able to perform these miracles to bring forth incredible changes in people's lives, from cancer through to strokes, through to all sorts of things. It's just amazing stories, right? And amazing experiences.
Unbelievably amazing. Always amazing to have you here.
Always awesome.
Are they saying goodbye to you? Or?
I think so. So on that note, in my mission, and it happened this way, that, and then I'm going to get off my chair here, but I'd just like to share with you that Marvin and I hired a house for 10 days to start mapping out mBraining. I'd already spent a couple of years doing all of the modelling work and pulling all the stuff together, and I said, Marvin, it's time, we've got to write a book. So we went away and we did these Armagnac or red wine fueled conversations at 2 in the morning, and it was this one night that at 2 in the morning we both realised the highest expressions of us. We were expressing, each person when they come to us expression, they're expressing yourself into the world. What would it mean for you in this life? And I said to myself, okay, so now I know there's a neuroscience basis to this. It paces the Western mindset. It's a great convincing strategy for the most hard-nosed senior executive. It brings spiritual tradition and meets modern neuroscience. And tomorrow morning when I get up, what would be, I truly now know I have to live this. So what would be the most compassionate, and the sequence counts, right? We know it's got to be in foundational setting. The most compassionate, creative, courageous me that I could do. tomorrow morning. And I went, I have to stop doing the work I've been doing. I have to stop doing my normal consulting work because it's making a change in organisations and people's lives, but it's not making a pivotal, fundamental change at the level of second order leadership wisdom on the planet. So I looked at Mum and said, tomorrow morning when I get up, and if every morning from now on I'm going to ask myself this question, and I hope and invite you guys to do the same thing after you've finished your coaching cert. But every morning before you get out of bed, ask yourself, what's the most compassionate, creative, courageous you that you could do that day? And whatever that answer is, live it. Live it. So for me, it was, I finished my consulting contract that I had with an equity company, and since November, nearly 2 years ago, I've been working purely on this. And I'm calling it I said I'd give it 2 years as a wisdom sabbatical. I'm doing my wisdom sabbatical, and whether or not it makes enough money to live on or not, doesn't matter. I'm giving it 2 years now. It isn't quite making enough money to live on. Luckily, my beloved nurse out there pays the bills. So, I put as much of the money that comes into mBit back into trying to spread it across the planet. And for me, it's really about doing the highest expression of me, knowing what we know. You'll experience it after the 4 days, knowing what we know now about all these things that bring together everything from the heart math stuff is aligned with NLP, is aligned with psychology and positive psychology and different wisdom traditions and the chakra system, and you bring it all together and go, well, of course. There's someone once said to me, you know what the M stands for, mBit? And I thought, yeah, I do know because I created the acronym. Because it stands, I said, well, it's always good to ask the question rather than going, yeah, I know. So, well, I don't know, what does it stand for? He goes, missing. The M is the missing bit. mBit is the missing bit. And it's like, wow, because I've heard that from person after person from around the planet who said, oh, I was into NLP, but there seemed to be something missing. I was into meditation, I taught meditation, but there seemed to be something missing. I've got a psych degree, but there seemed to be something missing. And when I learnt mBit, it's the bit that brought all of the things I knew together in a cohesive way. And it does. It's simple. It's profoundly simple. I mean, look how many steps are on the roadmap. Not many, 4 steps. How simple could it get? So it's successfully simple, and yet it makes transformationally profound changes to people's lives. Truly. I get emails every day from people around the planet who've read mBraining and changed their lives. Like, transformationally changed their lives. And the beautiful thing about people as coaches is you are now, I had that story about starfish, you young kid walking along, picking up the starfish, throwing in the water, and the guy comes along and said, the beach is littered with them, said, you can't possibly make a difference. The kid bends down, picks up another starfish, throws it in the water and says, you made a difference to that one. Oh. Well, I think about it as, you guys aren't, like what Nikki and Bill are doing here, I'm so proud of them, and I feel so blessed that, they felt so motivated by mBit to want to make a difference in their lives and people's lives, because they aren't just picking up the starfish. They're teaching people who'll take this process, you guys, and you won't just pick up the starfish. You're going to go and coach people to be aligned to their own wisdom, not some wisdom you'll whop them on the head with, to find their own wisdom for the highest expression of themselves. They'll be out picking up starfish and making a difference in people's lives. And that whole leverage, that fractal leverage of us all making incredible entrainment into the world is, I believe, possible to change every brain on the planet. That's my remit. I decided that I wanted to change the level of consciousness on every brain on the planet. I believe it's possible because the technologies are here now, and that we can hit a tipping point. That's why it's amazing. There are 402 coaches now on the planet across 10 countries. And that's just the beginning. We've only been going for just over 20 months with this. It's amazing to get a whole new field started and to have 50 trainers across 10 countries running trainings, and they have 400 people who are making a difference in people's lives every day. Wow. So on that note, which is my latest book. which I came out a couple weeks ago. And this is 10 years in the making. It's positive psychology, NLP, and MBIT applied to the ideas of human happiness. Now, it turns out that happiness is a core precursor to a lot of things. Like, if you increase happiness in people, they get more creative. So if you bootstrap happiness into people's lives, individuals or organisations, their natural level of creativity increases just by making them feel more happiness and joy. If you make people more happy, they start to be, like, even a simple intervention to make them more happy in a piece of research, they'll then act, even though they don't know that this is still part of the research, like, you know, at the end of they think the research is finished, and someone walks past, trips over and spills a whole heap of things, and they count how many seconds or minutes you spend helping, the subject spent helping the person who just spilled all of this. So levels of altruism and compassion and helping behaviour are increased by happiness, whether you make someone happy or you know, unhappy, or just, you know, flat affect. So happiness is a really important part of how we will bring forth highest expressions into the planet. Anyway, I got some copies there. If anyone wants a copy, I can give you two from you.
Are you signing them, Grant?
Oh.